The victory feast tasted like synthetic protein and regret, but Marcus Chen supposed that was fitting for the end of humanity's bloodiest war. Around him, his fellow soldiers celebrated with the kind of desperate enthusiasm that came from surviving something they probably shouldn't have. The orbital station's mess hall buzzed with conversations about spoils of war, territorial claims, and the alien tribute offerings that would be distributed tomorrow. "Chen, you magnificent bastard!" Captain Rodriguez slammed a cup of recycled water down beside Marcus's tray. "Did you hear? Command's letting us pick first from the tribute vault. Apparently, your little stunt with the quantum mines earned you top honors." Marcus poked at something that might have been vegetables once upon a time, before the food processors got creative with molecular restructuring. "Lucky me. What's everyone else going for?" "Henderson wants one of those neural interface headsets, the ones that let you control a whole fleet with your thoughts." Kapowski's eyeing the gravity manipulation gauntlets. "Smart choices, if you ask me." Rodriguez leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But between you and me, I heard they've got some kind of exotic matter synthesizer down there. Could set a man up for life." The idea of spending his newfound fame on weapons or wealth left Marcus feeling oddly hollow. He'd seen enough destruction to last several lifetimes, and the thought of profiting from it made his recycled dinner taste even worse. "What about the people, the prisoners?" Rodriguez nearly choked on his water. "The aliens. Chen, they're part of the tribute offering, technically speaking. But come on, who'd want to deal with that headache? Most of them barely speak standard, and their customs are completely alien, no pun intended. Plus, you'd be responsible for their care and feeding. Seems like more trouble than it's worth." Marcus pushed his tray away, appetite thoroughly gone. The war had started over territorial disputes in the Centauri sector, escalated through 3 solar systems, and ended with the complete capitulation of the Altarian Empire after humanity's surprise victory at the Battle of Proxima Station. The aliens had sued for peace so quickly that most humans suspected they'd been holding back during the conflict, which only made the whole situation more unsettling. The next morning, Marcus found himself standing before the tribute vault deep in the station's secure levels. The massive chamber stretched out before him like a cathedral of war spoils. Weapons that hummed with barely contained energy lined the walls. Crystalline data cores pulsed with stored knowledge. Containers marked with symbols he couldn't read promised technologies beyond human comprehension. And in the far corner, sitting on simple metal benches, were the people. Impressive collection, isn't it? Admiral Barnes gestured broadly at the assembled treasures. The Altarians really outdid themselves with this tribute. That gravity disruptor there could level a city block. The quantum computer arrays could solve humanity's energy crisis. And those bioenhancement chambers could extend human lifespan by centuries. Marcus nodded absently, but his attention kept drifting to the group of alien prisoners. They were surprisingly humanoid, if humans had longer, pointed ears and slightly larger eyes. Most sat quietly, some whispering among themselves in their melodic language. A few stared openly at the human soldiers with expressions ranging from curiosity to resignation. "What about them?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the aliens. Barnes followed his gaze and shrugged. "Part of the tribute package. Mostly servants, technicians, a few scholars. The Altarians have some peculiar ideas about honor and debt. They insisted on including people along with their technology, as if we'd want to manage alien civilians." The Admiral paused, studying Marcus with shrewd eyes. "You're not seriously considering that option, are you, Chen? With your pick of the lot, you could claim enough firepower to make yourself a warlord." "I've seen enough firepower for one lifetime, sir." Barnes looked genuinely puzzled, as if Marcus had just announced his intention to breathe underwater. "Well, it's your choice, soldier. Just remember, whatever you pick, you're stuck with it. No returns, no exchanges." Marcus walked slowly through the vault, past weapons that could crack moons and computers that could predict the future. The other soldiers who'd already made their selections moved with the satisfied swagger of men who just secured their fortunes. But something about the whole arrangement felt wrong, like claiming ownership of another person's life. He found himself standing before the group of aliens, studying their faces. Most avoided eye contact, but one young woman near the end of the bench looked up at him with what might have been amusement. She appeared to be the smallest and frailest of the group, with delicate features and hair that caught the chamber's artificial light like spun silver. Her pointed ears were slightly larger than the others, and she wore simple gray clothing that looked designed for manual labor. "You speak standard?" Marcus asked. "A little," she replied, her accent musical and strange. "You are the one who chooses." "Looks that way. What's your name?" "I am called Zara." She tilted her head, studying him with large dark eyes. "You look troubled, soldier. Are the spoils of war not to your liking?" The question caught him off guard. "It's complicated." "Ah," Zara nodded sagely. "Complicated is a very human word. My people prefer unnecessarily convoluted, but I suppose it means the same thing." Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. "You seem to be taking this pretty well for someone who just became a war prize." What is the human expression? When life gives you lemons, make something that won't explode in your face. Zara's expression remained perfectly serious. "I may have the saying wrong. Human idioms are very confusing." "Close enough." Marcus glanced around the vault one more time, at all the weapons and technologies that could reshape the galaxy. Then he looked back at Zara, who was watching him with patient curiosity. "This is probably the stupidest decision I'll ever make." "In my experience," Zara said, "the stupid decisions often turn out to be the most interesting ones." Admiral Barnes appeared at Marcus's shoulder, looking increasingly impatient. "Chen, we need to move this along. Other soldiers are waiting for their turns." Marcus took a deep breath. "I choose her." The silence that followed was so complete that Marcus could hear the station's life support systems humming in the walls. Barnes stared at him as if he'd suddenly sprouted a second head. Several nearby soldiers stopped their own deliberations to gawk. Even the other aliens looked surprised. "Her," Barnes repeated. "The servant girl." "Chen, are you having some kind of psychological episode? Because if you are, we have excellent medical facilities, and I'm sure we could arrange for a different selection once you're feeling more rational." "I'm fine, sir. That's my choice." Barnes opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to remember that military protocol didn't actually cover this particular situation. "Well, it's your funeral, soldier, or your headache at least." He made a note on his data pad with the air of a man documenting someone else's insanity. "The girl is yours, along with standard housing and subsistence allowances. Try not to let her break anything important." As the administrative details were sorted out, Marcus noticed that Zara was watching the proceedings with barely concealed amusement. When their eyes met, she gave him a small smile that somehow managed to be both grateful and mysteriously knowing. "So," she said as they walked toward the transport bay, "where exactly are we going?" "Kepler 442b. It's a frontier colony about 6 months out by standard jump drive. Not much there except farming settlements and mining operations." Marcus paused. "It's not exactly glamorous." "Glamorous is overrated," Zara replied. "I once lived somewhere very glamorous. It had marble floors and crystal ceilings and servants who served food on plates made of precious metals. Do you know what else it had?" "What?" "Terrible coffee. Absolutely undrinkable. Sometimes the simple life is better." She looked around the transport bay with its utilitarian metal walls and basic amenities. "Besides, I suspect your frontier colony will prove more interesting than you expect." Marcus was beginning to suspect that Zara herself would prove more interesting than he expected, but he kept that thought to himself. As their transport ship prepared for departure, he found himself wondering if he'd just made the smartest decision of his life or the dumbest. Given his track record, it could honestly go either way. One question, Zara said as they settled into their seats for the long journey ahead. This colony of yours, does it have good coffee? Terrible coffee, absolutely undrinkable. Zara's delighted laughter echoed through the transport bay, and Marcus decided that maybe, just maybe, he'd chosen wisely after all. 6 months later, Marcus was beginning to think he'd underestimated the complexity of living with an alien who had opinions about everything. Kepler 442b's primary settlement, New Geneva, sprawled across a valley between two mountain ranges like a collection of prefab modules that had given up on architectural ambition. The colony housed roughly 3,000 souls, most of them farmers, miners, or the kind of people who thought living on the edge of known space was a reasonable lifestyle choice. "Your shower makes a very interesting noise," Zara announced, emerging from the bathroom of Marcus's modest hab unit with her silver hair wrapped in a towel that had seen better decades. "It sounds like a wounded spacecraft attempting to achieve orbit." "That's because it probably is a repurposed spacecraft component," Marcus replied, not looking up from his morning report tablet. "Colony requisitions aren't exactly known for their creativity. Last month they sent us a food processor that turned out to be a disassembled waste reclamation unit." "Ah, that explains the interesting flavors." Zara settled into the chair across from him, somehow managing to make the utilitarian furniture look elegant. "Speaking of interesting flavors, I believe your coffee maker is attempting to communicate with me." Marcus glanced toward the kitchen alcove, where their ancient brewing unit was indeed making sounds it had never made before, a series of rhythmic beeps that almost sounded like a melody. "That's impossible. It's not even connected to the colony network." "Perhaps it has developed a primitive consciousness," Zara suggested with complete seriousness. "I have heard stranger things happen on frontier worlds. The isolation can affect machinery in unexpected ways." "Right." Marcus made a mental note to requisition a new coffee maker, assuming the colony had any in stock. Given their track record, they'd probably send him a disassembled hyperdrive motivator and call it close enough. "What are your plans for today?" "I thought I might visit the agricultural center again. The farmers seem to enjoy explaining their cultivation techniques, and I find their methods charmingly primitive." Over the past few months, Zara had integrated into colony life with surprising ease. She'd volunteered at the agricultural center, helped in the clinic, and somehow managed to befriend half the settlement despite her alien status. The other half remained suspicious, but Marcus figured that was pretty good odds for a frontier colony. What puzzled him was how quickly she'd adapted to their technology. Devices that should have been completely foreign to her seemed to respond to her touch. The medical scanner in the clinic had started working properly after she'd accidentally bumped into it. The atmospheric processor had stopped making ominous grinding noises after she'd visited the environmental station. "Marcus," Zara said, interrupting his thoughts, "I have a question about human courtship rituals." "Oh no." Marcus set down his tablet. "What did someone tell you?" Engineer Thompson explained that when human males are interested in females, they often bring gifts of flowers or food. But then Engineer Martinez said that was outdated, and modern humans prefer gifts of useful technology. Zara's expression was perfectly innocent. "I am confused about why Farmer Chen brought me a basket of turnips yesterday, and whether this constitutes a romantic gesture or simply agricultural enthusiasm." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Chen brought you turnips." "Very nice turnips," Zara assured him. "Well-formed and properly cultivated. I was quite impressed with their symmetry." "That's probably just Chen being friendly. He's proud of his vegetables." "Ah," Zara nodded thoughtfully. "And when Communications Officer Rodriguez offered to show me the quantum relay array, was that also friendly enthusiasm for his work?" Marcus suddenly understood why Zara had been fielding so many invitations lately. "Yeah, that's probably just Rodriguez being friendly. Humans are very friendly," Zara observed. though I notice you have not offered to show me any of your work equipment. I'm a soldier. My work equipment is designed to kill people. How romantic. Their conversation was interrupted by the colony's emergency alert system, which chose that moment to emit a sound like a dying whale having an argument with a malfunctioning hyperdrive. Marcus grabbed his sidearm and communication unit while Zara calmly finished her coffee. "Attention, all residents," came Colonel Morrison's voice over the intercom. "We have multiple bogies approaching the system. Unknown configuration, possibly hostile. All military personnel report to stations immediately. Civilians should remain in their quarters until further notice." Marcus was already moving toward the door when he realized Zara hadn't budged from her chair. "Zara, you need to get to the shelter." In a moment, she was staring at the communication unit with an expression of mild interest. "Your colonel sounds very stressed. Perhaps someone should suggest he try breathing exercises." "Zara." Yes, I know." She stood and moved toward the door with unhurried grace. "Stay safe, Marcus, and try not to shoot anything important." Marcus sprinted toward the command center, arriving just as the tactical displays lit up with incoming sensor data. 3 ships, definitely not human design, approaching from the outer system at high velocity. Their energy signatures were unfamiliar, but their trajectory suggested hostile intent. "What do we know about them?" Marcus asked, sliding into his position at the defense console. "Nothing good," Colonel Morrison replied grimly. "They're not responding to hails, and their ships match the profile of Kepler raider vessels. Probably pirates looking for easy pickings on a frontier world." The Kepler raiders were a loose confederation of criminals and outcasts who preyed on isolated colonies. They weren't particularly dangerous individually, but they made up for it with numbers and a complete lack of scruples about targeting civilians. "ETA to orbital approach?" Marcus asked. 47 minutes, came the reply from the sensor station. "They're not trying to hide their approach, which suggests they think we're helpless." Marcus studied the tactical display. New Geneva's defenses consisted of a handful of surface-to-orbit missile batteries, some automated gun turrets, and whatever weapons the colonists could improvise. Against 3 fully armed raider ships, their chances weren't great. "Sir," Communications Officer Rodriguez called out, "I'm getting some strange readings from the orbital sensor array. It's like the system is recalibrating itself." "Recalibrating how?" "I'm not sure. The resolution is improving, and we're getting detailed scans of the incoming ships. More detailed than our sensors should be capable of, actually." Morrison frowned at his displays. "How detailed?" "Detailed enough to target individual system components, sir. Hull composition, shield frequencies, power distribution. It's like having a full technical readout of their vessels." Marcus felt a strange suspicion forming in the back of his mind. When did this start? "About 5 minutes ago, right after the alert went out." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's head with uncomfortable clarity. The mysteriously improving equipment around the colony. Zara's uncanny ability to fix things just by being near them. Her casual knowledge of human technology and idioms. "Rodriguez," Marcus said slowly, "where's the nearest civilian shelter to the communications array?" "Block 7 residential unit." "Wait." Rodriguez checked his display. "That's where you live, isn't it, Chen?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Of course it is." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation and growing technological impossibilities. The colony's defensive systems began operating with efficiency that bordered on miraculous. Targeting computers that had never worked properly suddenly achieved lock-on solutions that would have impressed a military academy instructor. Power distribution networks optimized themselves for maximum defensive output. When the raiders finally entered weapons range, they found themselves facing not a helpless frontier colony, but a fortress with targeting solutions that anticipated their every move. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted approximately 4 minutes. The raiders retreated in confusion after their shields failed, their weapons misfired, and their navigation systems started displaying what appeared to be advertising for New Geneva's agricultural products. "Well," Colonel Morrison said into the sudden quiet, "that was unexpected." Marcus keyed his communicator. "Zara, are you all right?" "Perfectly fine," came her cheerful reply, "though I think your coffee maker may have achieved sentience. It just brewed a perfect cup without being asked." "Zara." "Yes, we need to talk." "I thought we might." There was amusement in her voice. "Should I put on more coffee? This seems like a conversation that might require caffeine." Marcus looked around the command center, where his fellow officers were staring at displays showing impossible defensive capabilities and sensor readings that defied explanation. Then he looked at his communicator, through which he could hear Zara humming something that sounded suspiciously like the melody their coffee maker had been playing that morning. "Yeah," he said finally, "put on more coffee." The coffee was, predictably, perfect. Marcus sat across from Zara in their small kitchen alcove, trying to reconcile the woman calmly sipping from her mug with the impossible defensive display he just witnessed. Outside, the colony was returning to normal, whatever passed for normal when your defensive systems had just performed miracles. "So," Marcus began carefully, "interesting day." "Very interesting," Zara agreed. "Though I think Engineer Rodriguez may have wet himself when the targeting computer started working properly. You humans have such amusing stress responses." "Zara." "Yes. What did you do?" Zara set down her mug and gave him a look of wounded innocence. "I followed your instructions. I stayed in our quarters like a good civilian and waited for the all-clear. Though I did spend some time reading, which I hope doesn't violate any emergency protocols." "What were you reading?" "Technical manuals. Your colony's computer system has a fascinating collection of maintenance documents. Did you know that most of your equipment is operating at approximately 30% efficiency? The waste heat alone could power a small city, if properly channeled." Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "And you just happen to be reading these manuals during a pirate attack. Coincidences are the universe's way of having fun," Zara said solemnly. "Besides, I find human engineering philosophy very instructive. You build things to work adequately rather than optimally, which creates interesting opportunities for improvement." Before Marcus could pursue this line of questioning further, his communicator chimed with an incoming priority message. Colonel Morrison's face appeared on the small screen, looking harried and confused. "Chen, I need you and your companion to report to headquarters immediately. We've got a situation." "What kind of situation, sir?" "The kind where 3 Altarian diplomatic vessels just dropped out of hyperspace and are requesting permission to dock," Morrison replied grimly. "They're asking specifically about a missing citizen named Zara." Marcus looked at Zara, who had gone very still. Her mug was halfway to her lips, suspended as if she'd forgotten how drinking worked. "Zara," Marcus said quietly. "This is awkward," she replied. 20 minutes later, they stood in the colony's main conference room facing a holographic projection of 3 very stern-looking Altarians. Unlike Zara, these aliens wore elaborate robes and carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of people accustomed to being obeyed. Their pointed ears were adorned with what appeared to be ceremonial rings, and their expressions suggested they were not particularly pleased with current circumstances. "Honored Zara," the lead figure said, his voice carrying the weight of formal protocol, "the High Council has been searching for you for many cycles. Your sudden disappearance has caused considerable disruption." "Hello, Father," Zara replied casually. "How are things at home?" Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. "Father." "Did I not mention that?" Zara asked. "My apologies. This is High Counselor Tharn, first Speaker of the Altarian Empire and Supreme Military Commander of our forces. Also, as he noted, my father." The silence in the room was so complete that Marcus could hear the colony's atmospheric processors humming through the walls. Colonel Morrison's face had gone through several interesting color changes before settling on a pale green that suggested imminent nausea. "You're telling me," Morrison said slowly, "that the woman we've been housing for the past 6 months is Altarian royalty." "Not royalty exactly," Zara corrected. "More like extremely important person whose absence may have caused a minor governmental crisis." "Minor," Tharn's voice rose an octave. "Minor. Child, 3 star systems have been threatening secession because they believe you were assassinated. The military council has been demanding retaliatory strikes against human settlements, and the science directorate has been completely non-functional without your oversight." "The science directorate was always non-functional," Zara replied dismissively. "They just blame me when projects fail, because it's easier than admitting they don't understand quantum mechanics." Marcus was beginning to understand why the colony's technology had been improving. "Zara, what exactly do you do?" "Back home, I mean." "Oh, the usual," she said airily. "Theoretical physics, applied engineering, technological development, occasional consultation on military applications of exotic matter manipulation. Nothing too exciting." "Nothing too exciting." Tharn looked incredulous. "You designed our entire fleet propulsion system. You created the neural interface networks that coordinate our planetary defenses. You—" "Father, you're embarrassing me in front of my friends." Morrison had progressed from pale green to an alarming shade of purple. "You're the chief scientist of the Altarian Empire." "Was," Zara corrected. "I've recently taken a sabbatical to explore human agricultural techniques and coffee preparation methods." "Coffee preparation." Tharn's expression suggested he was questioning his daughter's sanity. "Zara, you are the most brilliant mind in 17 star systems. You've revolutionized faster-than-light travel, created artificial intelligence indistinguishable from organic consciousness, and solved the unified field theory as a recreational puzzle. And you want to discuss coffee? Have you ever had good coffee, Father? Because I'm starting to suspect that our empire's decline is directly related to the quality of our stimulant beverages." Marcus watched this exchange with growing fascination and horror. "So when you said you used to live somewhere glamorous with terrible coffee?" "I was referring to the Imperial Palace on Altair Prime," Zara confirmed. 17,000 rooms, a staff of 10,000, and a beverage preparation system that could turn pure mountain spring water into something resembling industrial lubricant. "The palace coffee system was based on your own designs," Tharn pointed out. "Yes, well, nobody's perfect." Morrison had finally found his voice again. "Ma'am, Your Highness, whatever your proper title is, we had no idea who you were. If we had known, you would have treated me like a diplomatic asset instead of a person," Zara finished. "Which is precisely why I didn't tell you. Do you have any idea how refreshing it's been to have conversations that don't begin with honored Zara? We need you to solve this impossible problem that threatens the survival of civilization." "Actually," Morrison said, "that's exactly how most of our conversations with you have begun." Zara paused, considering this. "Fair point, but at least your impossible problems are interesting. When was the last time someone asked me to figure out why their coffee maker was achieving consciousness?" "Is that what happened?" Marcus asked. "Not exactly consciousness," Zara replied. "More like a very basic artificial intelligence with an obsessive interest in optimal brewing temperatures. I may have been a bit careless with some quantum resonance adjustments to your local computer network." Tharn was staring at his daughter with the expression of someone watching a natural disaster in slow motion. "Zara, please tell me you haven't been casually upgrading human technology." "I prefer to think of it as gentle optimization. The same gentle optimization that turned our capital city's traffic management system into a poet. That was an accident, and the poetry was quite good." Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically. If I may interrupt this family discussion, we need to address the current situation. We have 3 diplomatic vessels in orbit and I assume they're here to retrieve their, missing scientist. That was the plan, Tharn admitted. However, given that Zara appears to have chosen her current location voluntarily, the matter becomes more complex. Altarian law is quite specific about individual autonomy, even for individuals whose absence causes widespread governmental panic. I haven't caused widespread governmental panic, Zara protested. At most, it's been localized governmental anxiety. Child, the Emperor has been eating nothing but stress relief tablets for 6 months. Uncle always was dramatic. Remember when he declared a state of emergency because the palace gardens were blooming out of season. Those flowers were blooming because you had adjusted the planetary climate control system to optimize photosynthetic efficiency, Tharn replied dryly. The entire ecosystem nearly collapsed. Marcus was beginning to understand the scope of what he'd gotten himself into. So you're saying that Zara is basically the technological backbone of your entire civilization. Technological backbone, military consultant, and occasional cause of existential dread among the ruling council, Tharn confirmed. Her absence has been challenging, but not impossible, Zara interjected cheerfully. See, you've managed 6 whole months without me destroying anything important by accident. That's real progress. The Science Directorate built a monument to you last month, Tharn said. It promptly achieved sentience and began offering unsolicited advice about research methodology. I told them not to use recursive quantum matrices in architectural applications. Marcus looked around the conference room, where Morrison and his staff were listening to this conversation, with the glazed expressions of people trying to process information that broke their understanding of reality. Outside, he could see colonists going about their daily business, completely unaware that their newest resident was potentially the most dangerous person in known space. So what happens now? Marcus asked. That, Tharn said, looking at his daughter with a mixture of affection and exasperation, depends entirely on Zara. We cannot compel her return, but we can certainly hope that she might consider the welfare of the empire that depends on her. I am considering it, Zara replied. I'm also considering the fact that I've finally found a place where people appreciate my coffee maker upgrades. Your coffee maker achieved consciousness and started composing haikus about morning beverages, Marcus pointed out. Exactly. When was the last time anyone on Altair Prime got excited about improving coffee technology? Tharn closed his eyes as if seeking patience from the universe. Zara, please, the Empire needs you. The Empire has needed me for 30 years, Father. Maybe it's time it learned to function without constant technological miracles. Zara paused, then added more gently, besides, I'm not sure I want to go back to being the person who solves everyone else's problems. And what do you want to be instead? Zara looked at Marcus, then at Morrison and his bewildered staff, then back at her father's holographic image. I want to be someone who gets excited about turnips and fixes coffee makers and helps defend a small frontier colony from pirates. I want to be ordinary. Zara, Tharn said quietly, you have never been ordinary, and you never will be. Perhaps not, she agreed, but I can try. 3 days later, Marcus was beginning to think that Zara's definition of ordinary needed some serious recalibration. He stood in the agricultural center, watching her explain to Farmer Chen why his turnip cultivation could be improved by adjusting the soil's quantum resonance frequency. A conversation that should have been impossible on multiple levels. You see, Zara was saying, gesturing at Chen's prized turnips, the molecular structure of your soil is experiencing harmonic interference from the colony's power grid. A simple phase adjustment would increase your yield by approximately 40%. Chen nodded as if this made perfect sense. And how exactly would I adjust the quantum whatever of my dirt? Oh, you wouldn't need to do anything complicated. I could just recalibrate your irrigation system to emit a specific frequency pattern. It would take about 5 minutes. Marcus had learned not to be surprised when Zara casually offered to perform technological miracles, but he was still adjusting to the fact that she treated revolutionary scientific breakthroughs as minor household repairs. Zara, he said, joining their conversation, didn't you promise Colonel Morrison you'd stop upgrading things without permission? I promised I'd stop upgrading things without asking, she corrected. Chen, would you like me to optimize your turnip production? Hell yes, Chen replied enthusiastically. See, I asked. Before Marcus could point out the difference between asking permission and asking rhetorical questions, his communicator erupted with the colony's emergency alert. But instead of the usual dying whale sound, it played a cheerful melody that somehow managed to convey urgency without causing panic. That's new, Marcus observed. I may have made some adjustments to the alert system, Zara admitted. The previous sound was scientifically proven to increase stress hormones by 300%. This one stimulates focus and calm determination. Morrison's voice came over the system, notably calmer than usual despite the circumstances. All personnel to emergency stations. We have multiple unknown vessels approaching the system. Configuration suggests military origin. This is not a drill. Marcus and Zara exchanged glances. Think it's your father coming back? Marcus asked. Unlikely. Father's ships would have announced themselves, and their approach vectors would be much more polite. Zara's expression grew thoughtful. These sound like someone who doesn't want to be identified until they're close enough to do something unpleasant. They hurried to the command center, where Marcus found Morrison staring at tactical displays that showed far too many red dots approaching from the outer system. Unlike the Raider attack a few days earlier, these ships were moving in coordinated formations and broadcasting military-grade sensor jamming. How many? Marcus asked, sliding into his position. 12 confirmed, possibly more hiding behind the jamming, Morrison replied grimly. Heavy cruiser class, unknown configuration. They're not responding to hails, and their approach pattern suggests they mean business. Any idea who they are? Negative. The ships don't match any known human designs, and they're not Altarian either. Morrison glanced toward Zara, who had quietly taken a position at an unused console. Any thoughts? Several, Zara replied, her fingers dancing across the interface with casual expertise. None of them particularly optimistic. These appear to be consortium vessels. Consortium. Think of them as very unpleasant people with more weapons than sense, and a disturbing tendency to shoot first and skip the questions entirely. Zara paused in her work. They're essentially pirates, but with better organization and significantly worse manners. And they're here probably because someone told them there was valuable alien technology on Kepler 442b. Zara's voice was carefully neutral, which, to be fair, is technically accurate. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together with uncomfortable clarity. They're here for you. Most likely, the consortium has a standing bounty on Altarian technology and scientists. Apparently, I'm worth quite a lot on the black market. Morrison looked up from his displays. How much is quite a lot? Enough to buy several small planets, Zara replied casually. Though I'm told the price has gone up since my disappearance. Scarcity increases value, according to basic economic principles. Wonderful. Morrison turned back to his tactical screens. ETA to engagement range. 40 minutes, came the reply from the sensor station. Sir, I'm reading some unusual activity from our defensive systems. It looks like they're upgrading themselves. Upgrading how? I'm not entirely sure. The targeting computers are suddenly showing resolution capabilities that shouldn't be possible, and the missile batteries are reporting ammunition types that aren't in our inventory. Morrison shot a look at Zara, who was studying her console with the intense concentration of someone pretending not to hear an accusation. Zara. Yes, What did you do? I may have implemented some minor defensive improvements while you were discussing the tactical situation, she admitted. Nothing too dramatic, just some basic upgrades to your targeting systems, ammunition efficiency improvements, and a few minor modifications to your shield generators. We don't have shield generators. You do now. Marcus watched the tactical display update to show a defensive perimeter around New Geneva that had definitely not existed an hour earlier. Zara, where exactly did these improvements come from? Oh, I've been working on them in my spare time. Your colony's industrial fabricators are surprisingly versatile once you bypass their safety limitations and optimize their quantum assembly matrices. You've been building weapons in your spare time. Not weapons exactly, more like enhanced defensive capabilities. There's a difference. Zara's fingers continued their dance across the console. Besides, I wanted to make sure I could protect my new home if necessary. Morrison stared at the displays showing defensive capabilities that belonged on a military starbase, not a frontier colony. How much did you upgrade our defenses? Enough, Zara replied vaguely. Oh, and I took the liberty of sending a message to the approaching fleet. What kind of message? A polite request that they reconsider their current course of action, along with a detailed analysis of our newly enhanced defensive capabilities, and a strongly worded suggestion that they find somewhere else to conduct their business. And if they don't listen, then they'll discover that I've been very productive during my sabbatical from empire-threatening technological development. The next 20 minutes passed with increasing tension as the consortium fleet continued its approach despite Zara's polite request. The command center filled with reports of impossible defensive improvements appearing throughout the colony. Missile batteries that had been rated for small patrol craft were suddenly capable of engaging heavy cruisers. Sensor arrays were providing targeting data with pinpoint accuracy across interplanetary distances. Contact from the lead vessel, Rodriguez announced. They're demanding we surrender Zara immediately or face the consequences. What did you tell them? Morrison asked. I told them that New Geneva doesn't negotiate with pirates and they could go find a nice black hole to jump into. Diplomatic as always, Rodriguez. Thank you, sir. Zara looked up from her console with an expression of mild curiosity. They're charging their weapons. How rude. Don't they know it's considered poor etiquette to threaten civilians before proper introductions? Can our defenses handle 12 heavy cruisers? Marcus asked. Oh yes, Zara replied with cheerful confidence. Though I should probably mention that our defenses may be slightly more effective than I initially calculated. How much more effective? Well, I may have accidentally created a defensive grid that could successfully engage a small fleet of Imperial dreadnoughts. Morrison blinked, accidentally. I've been working with limited materials and had to improvise some solutions. It's surprisingly difficult to build modest defensive improvements when you're used to designing weapons that can crack planets. The tactical display suddenly lit up as the consortium fleet entered weapons range and opened fire. Brilliant energy beams and missile volleys streaked toward New Geneva, only to impact against shimmering barriers that appeared around the colony like soap bubbles made of crystallized light. Shields holding at 98%. Rodriguez reported with barely concealed glee. No damage to colony infrastructure. Return fire, Morrison asked. If you'd like, Zara replied. Though I should warn you that our response might be a bit more dramatic than they're expecting. Define dramatic. Well, I may have integrated some theoretical weapons concepts into our defensive grid. Nothing too exotic, just some basic matter disruption arrays and a few gravitational manipulation systems. Marcus watched the tactical display as New Geneva's response fire reached the consortium fleet. The result was less a battle and more a demonstration of applied physics. 3 enemy ships simply ceased to exist in flashes of exotic energy. Two more found themselves caught in localized gravity wells that crushed their hulls like tin cans. The remaining vessels discovered that their weapons had mysteriously transformed into harmless light shows. "Are they dead?" Morrison asked quietly. "Oh no," Zara assured him. "I set the weapons to disable rather than destroy. They're all quite alive, though probably very confused and possibly in need of fresh underwear." The lead consortium vessel was attempting to retreat when its engines suddenly shut down. A moment later, Rodriguez received a transmission that consisted entirely of someone screaming about impossible physics and requesting immediate surrender. "Should we accept their surrender?" Morrison asked. "Absolutely," Zara replied. "Though I think we should probably discuss what to do with 12 disabled pirate ships and their crews." Marcus looked around the command center, where his fellow colonists were staring at displays showing the results of a battle that had redefined their understanding of what was possible. Outside, he could see colonists going about their business, most of them unaware that they had just witnessed their home transform from a vulnerable frontier settlement into a fortress that could challenge major military powers. "Zara," he said finally, "when you said you wanted to be ordinary, I may have been somewhat optimistic about my ability to avoid technological complications," she admitted. "But in my defense, I did try to keep the defensive improvements subtle." "Subtle?" Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "You turned our colony into a superweapon." "Not a superweapon," Zara corrected. "More like a very well-defended agricultural community with an unusually robust security system that can disable military fleets." "Well, yes, but think of how safe our turnips will be." Marcus was beginning to think that living with a genius had serious drawbacks, especially when that genius had a tendency to solve problems by accidentally revolutionizing entire fields of science. 2 weeks after the consortium incident, he found himself sitting in Morrison's office trying to explain why their agricultural reports now included footnotes about quantum cultivation theory. "Chen, I need you to have a conversation with your companion about the meaning of the word subtle," Morrison said, gesturing at a stack of reports that seemed to grow thicker every day. "Yesterday she helped engineer Martinez fix a water recycling unit, and now it's producing H2O that's apparently purer than anything achievable through conventional filtration." "How much purer?" "Purer than distilled water. Purer than laboratory-grade sterile water. According to Martinez, it's approaching theoretical molecular perfection." Morrison rubbed his temples. "He's convinced we could sell it to research facilities for more than our entire annual budget. And the problem is that we're supposed to be a quiet frontier colony, not a showcase for impossible technology. Every improvement Zara makes increases the chances that someone else will come looking for her." Marcus had been thinking the same thing. The disabled consortium ships were still in system, their crews detained pending arrival of proper authorities, but word of New Geneva's unexpected defensive capabilities was already spreading through unofficial channels. Pirates, researchers, and government agents would all be very interested in a colony that could casually defeat military fleets. "I'll talk to her," Marcus promised. "Good. And while you're at it, ask her to stop volunteering at the medical center. Dr. Patel is having an existential crisis because his diagnostic equipment started providing treatment recommendations yesterday." Treatment recommendations. Detailed surgical procedures, medication dosages, and recovery timelines with 99% accuracy. The equipment is essentially practicing medicine without a license. Marcus found Zara in their HAB unit, sitting cross-legged on the floor and surrounded by what appeared to be the disassembled components of every electronic device they owned. She looked up as he entered, a coil of optical cable draped around her neck like jewelry. "Hello, Marcus. How was your meeting with the colonel?" "Educational. What are you doing?" "Optimization," she replied cheerfully. I realized that our living space could be much more efficient if I integrated all our systems into a unified network. No more separate devices performing redundant functions. Marcus surveyed the chaos of components and cables. Zara, where's our food processor? Currently serving as the central processing unit for our new integrated home management system. Don't worry, it can still process food. It can also regulate temperature, monitor air quality, provide entertainment, manage communications, and offer helpful suggestions about meal planning. Our food processor is giving meal suggestions. Very good ones. It recommended a turnip soup recipe that optimizes vitamin absorption while accounting for your individual metabolic requirements. Marcus sat down carefully, avoiding a pile of circuit boards. Zara, we need to talk. That sounds ominous. Are you going to tell me to stop improving things? Morrison is concerned that your improvements are attracting attention, the kind of attention that might put the colony in danger. Zara's expression grew thoughtful. You mean like the 12 consortium ships we defeated without breaking a sweat? Exactly like that. Word is spreading about what happened here. Military intelligence wants to investigate. Corporate research divisions are sending inquiries. And there are rumors that other alien governments are interested in our technological developments. Zara set down the component she'd been examining. I see the problem. Do you? You're worried that my presence here will turn New Geneva into a target for everyone who wants to acquire advanced technology through violence or espionage. That's a very concise way of putting it. It's also probably accurate, Zara admitted. I've been trying to be subtle, but subtle is relative when you're accustomed to building star-destroying weapons as weekend projects. Marcus looked around their demolished living space. This is you being subtle. This is me being domestic. There's a difference. Zara began gathering components with practiced efficiency. But you're right about the attention problem. Perhaps it's time I considered returning to Altair Prime. Is that what you want? What I want is to continue living quietly with someone who appreciates my coffee maker improvements and doesn't expect me to solve every technological crisis in the galaxy. She paused in her reassembly work. But what I want and what's best for the people I care about might be different things. Before Marcus could respond, their newly integrated communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Morrison's face appeared on what had previously been their microwave display, looking more harried than usual. Chen, we've got a situation. 3 more fleets just dropped out of hyperspace. 1 human, 1 Altarian, and 1 I don't recognize. They're all demanding to speak with Zara, and they're all heavily armed. How heavily armed? Marcus asked. The kind of heavily armed that makes our upgraded defenses look like a stern letter of complaint. Zara sighed and stood up, somehow managing to restore their living space to normal functionality with a few quick adjustments. I suppose I should go deal with this. Deal with what exactly? Military politics, scientific curiosity, and probably at least 1 attempted kidnapping. She moved toward the door with the resigned air of someone facing an unpleasant but familiar task. The human fleet is likely military intelligence wanting to study our defensive improvements. The Altarian ships are probably Father's attempt to retrieve me before I cause an interstellar incident. And the unknown fleet. Yes, that could be anyone. Consortium reinforcements, corporate mercenaries, alien researchers, or possibly just very lost tourists. They hurried to the command center, where Morrison was coordinating with 3 separate fleets while trying to maintain some semblance of diplomatic protocol. The main display showed a complex orbital dance as heavily armed vessels maneuvered for position, while carefully avoiding anything that might be interpreted as a hostile act. Status report, Marcus said, taking his position. The human fleet is requesting permission to conduct a technological assessment of our defensive capabilities, Morrison replied. The Altarian vessels are demanding the immediate return of their missing scientist. and the unknown fleet is offering to purchase our entire colony for an amount of money that would make us all wealthy beyond imagination. In our response, I told them all to get in line and wait their turn. Zara moved to her usual console and began analyzing the tactical situation. The unknown fleet is hegemony, she announced after a moment. Corporate military contractors with a reputation for acquiring advanced technology through aggressive negotiation. How aggressive? Morrison asked. The kind where they make offers you literally can't refuse because they've surrounded your planet with battleships. Wonderful. Morrison studied the display showing 3 fleets in an increasingly tense standoff. Any suggestions? Several, Zara replied, none of them particularly subtle. At this point, I think we're past subtle. In that case, Zara's fingers began dancing across her console with familiar efficiency. I'm going to need approximately 10 minutes to implement a comprehensive solution. What kind of solution? The kind that will resolve our current diplomatic crisis, while demonstrating why attempting to threaten New Geneva is generally a poor life choice. Marcus watched Zara work, noting the way systems throughout the colony began responding to her commands. External sensor arrays reconfigured themselves for maximum efficiency. The defensive grid that had handled the consortium fleet started drawing power from sources that probably shouldn't have existed. And somewhere in the colony's industrial sector, fabrication systems began producing components for purposes Marcus preferred not to contemplate. Zara, he said quietly, what exactly are you building? A teaching aid, she replied without looking up from her work. Sometimes the most effective diplomacy involves providing clear, memorable demonstrations of why peaceful solutions are preferable to aggressive alternatives. You're building a weapon. I'm building a very convincing argument. The next few minutes passed in tense silence as 3 fleets maintained their standoff, while New Geneva's mysterious defensive improvements reached new levels of impossibility. When Zara finally stepped back from her console, the colony's energy readings had increased by several orders of magnitude. Ready, she announced. Ready for what? Morrison asked. Comprehensive diplomatic communication. Zara opened a channel to all 3 fleets simultaneously. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to addressing entire governments. Attention all vessels. This is Zara, formerly of the Altarian Science Directorate, currently resident of New Geneva Colony. I'm going to explain this once, so please pay attention. She paused, apparently for dramatic effect. First, to the human fleet. You want to study our defensive technology. Unfortunately, our defensive technology is specifically designed to prevent unauthorized study. Any attempt to conduct scans or board this facility will result in your ships experiencing sudden and comprehensive mechanical failure. Second, to the Altarian vessels. Hello, Father. I appreciate your concern, but I'm exactly where I want to be. I'll visit for holidays, but I'm not coming home permanently. Third, to the Hegemony fleet. Your offer to purchase our colony is rejected. We're not for sale at any price. Another pause. Now, to demonstrate why these positions are non-negotiable. The space around New Geneva suddenly filled with impossible geometry as Zara's teaching aid activated. Reality bent, twisted, and folded back on itself in patterns that human eyes weren't designed to process. The 3 fleets found themselves caught in gravitational fields that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, while their weapons systems reported error messages in languages that hadn't been invented yet. What you're experiencing, Zara continued calmly, is a localized demonstration of what happens when someone with my educational background gets annoyed. Your ships are currently existing in a state of quantum uncertainty that could resolve in several ways, ranging from completely harmless to scattered across multiple universes. The effect lasted exactly 30 seconds before reality snapped back to normal, leaving 3 fleets intact but probably in need of new understanding of what was possible. Questions? Zara asked sweetly. The response was immediate and unanimous. All three fleets requested permission to withdraw to a safe distance and asked if they could please never experience that again. Certainly, Zara replied. Have a lovely day. As the fleets departed with suspicious haste, Morrison stared at his displays showing readings that shouldn't have been possible with any known technology. Zara, he said finally, what did you just do? Solved our diplomatic crisis. By threatening 3 military fleets with weapons that violate the laws of physics. By explaining that New Geneva is under the protection of someone who finds the laws of physics to be more like helpful suggestions. Marcus looked around the command center, where his fellow colonists were processing the fact that they now lived in the most secure location in known space, protected by a woman who could apparently rewrite reality when sufficiently motivated. So, he said, still planning to be ordinary. Zara smiled. I'm exactly as ordinary as I want to be. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the expanded agricultural center watching Zara explain quantum cultivation principles to a group of visiting researchers from 12 different star systems. New Geneva had transformed from an obscure frontier colony into the galaxy's most unlikely center of learning, and Marcus was still adjusting to the change. The key is understanding that plants exist in quantum superposition until observed, Zara was saying, gesturing at Chen's turnips, which had grown to impossible sizes and somehow managed to achieve perfect nutritional balance. By carefully modulating the observation frequency, we can encourage favorable quantum states to collapse into reality. Dr. Yamamoto from the Terran Agricultural Institute raised her hand. But surely the energy requirements for maintaining quantum coherence in macro-scale biological systems would be prohibitive. Only if you insist on using conventional physics, Zara replied cheerfully. I find that conventional physics is often unnecessarily limiting. Marcus smiled and moved on, making his rounds through the colony that had become his life's work. After the incident with the 3 fleets, word had spread that New Geneva was under the protection of someone who could bend reality when motivated. Rather than attracting more threats, this had somehow resulted in a steady stream of scientists, diplomats, and researchers who wanted to study what they politely termed alternative technological approaches. Zara had embraced her role as an informal teacher, sharing carefully selected insights with visitors while maintaining strict limits on what could be replicated elsewhere. The result was a unique institution that advanced scientific understanding without destabilizing galactic civilization mostly. Marcus, Engineer Martinez called out as he passed the industrial section. You need to see this. Zara helped us design a new atmospheric processor, and it's producing air that's somehow better than the original specifications. Better how? It's got trace elements that improve cognitive function and reduce stress hormones. Breathing our air actually makes people smarter and happier. Marcus made a mental note to ask Zara about the ethics of improving air without informed consent, then decided that happier, smarter people probably weren't going to complain about the arrangement. He found Zara in their HAB unit, which had evolved into something resembling a cross between a comfortable home and a physics laboratory. She was sitting at a workbench that definitely hadn't existed that morning, assembling what appeared to be a small device from components that might have been crystallized light. New project? Marcus asked. Wedding present, she replied without looking up. Rodriguez finally proposed to Dr. Patel, and I thought they might appreciate something special. What does it do? It's a localized probability enhancement field. It will ensure that their marriage experiences statistically favorable outcomes for domestic harmony, career advancement, and general life satisfaction. Marcus sat down across from her, still amazed by how naturally she discussed concepts that should have been impossible. You're giving them a machine that improves their luck, more or less, though I prefer to think of it as applied quantum relationship counseling. And this is normal behavior for you. Marcus, 6 months ago you thought I was a helpless refugee. Now you're asking me about the normalcy of giving probability manipulators as wedding gifts. I think your definition of normal has evolved considerably. She had a point. Marcus looked around their living space, where devices that casually violated several laws of physics shared shelf space with pictures of colony events and a collection of coffee mugs that had achieved minor sentience. Somehow, the impossible had become routine. Speaking of evolution, Zara continued, I received a message from Father today. The Altarian Empire has officially recognized New Geneva as an independent research institution under my directorship. We're now diplomatically immune and eligible for scientific exchange programs. Meaning this colony is now officially the first joint human-alien academic institution, with protections that make it nearly impossible for anyone to threaten us legally. She paused in her work. Also, Uncle wants to visit next month to see what I've been up to. Your uncle, the Emperor. Former Emperor. He abdicated last week and appointed a governing council. Apparently, watching me create a successful alternative to imperial bureaucracy inspired him to try democracy. Marcus stared at her. You accidentally caused a revolution. Not a revolution exactly. More like an enlightened transition to representative government. Though I suppose the distinction is largely semantic. Before Marcus could process the implications of Zara's casual political influence, his communicator chimed with a message from Morrison. The colonel's face appeared on the screen, wearing the expression of someone who had learned to expect the impossible but still occasionally found it surprising. Chen, we've got visitors. A delegation from the Galactic Trade Federation wants to discuss establishing New Geneva as a neutral meeting point for interspecies negotiations. Apparently, our reputation for impossible solutions to complex problems has reached the highest levels of galactic politics. How do you want to handle it? Marcus asked. Same way we handle everything else. Ask Zara if she has any opinions about galactic diplomacy, then prepare for our lives to become more complicated in ways we can't anticipate. Zara looked up from her work with interest. Galactic diplomacy could be entertaining. Most interstellar treaties fail because the negotiating parties can't agree on basic physical constants. I could fix that. Please don't fix galactic politics, Marcus said quickly. Some things should probably remain broken. Spoil sport. That evening, Marcus and Zara sat on the observation deck of their HAB unit, watching the sunset paint the colony in shades of gold and purple. New Geneva sprawled below them, no longer the collection of desperate prefab modules he'd first seen, but a thriving community that had become home to humans and aliens working together on projects that advanced the boundaries of knowledge. Do you ever regret it? Marcus asked. Giving up your position, your empire, all that power and responsibility. Zara considered the question, while sipping coffee from a mug that quietly hummed contentious melodies. I regret missing Uncle's abdication ceremony. Apparently, he gave a speech about the importance of finding your own path that referenced turnip cultivation as a metaphor for personal growth. I meant giving up your old life. Marcus, my old life involved solving other people's problems while sitting in meetings that lasted for days and drinking coffee that could strip paint. My new life involves solving interesting problems with people I care about while drinking coffee that achieves minor consciousness and occasionally offers helpful brewing suggestions. She smiled. I think I made the right choice, even though you're still solving impossible problems. Yes, but now they're my impossible problems, chosen freely rather than imposed by imperial necessity. And I get to share the solutions with people who appreciate them, instead of filing them away in classified archives. Marcus looked out over the colony, where lights were beginning to appear in windows as families settled in for the evening. Human children played with alien visitors in the common areas. Scientists from a dozen species collaborated on projects that would have been inconceivable a year earlier. And somewhere in the agricultural center, Chen's quantum turnips were probably achieving new levels of nutritional perfection. "You know," he said, "when I chose you from that tribute vault, I thought I was being merciful to someone who needed protection. And instead you got someone who turned your quiet frontier colony into the galaxy's most unlikely center of learning and diplomacy." Something like that. Zara reached over and took his hand. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice too. You could have picked weapons that would have made you powerful or technology that would have made you wealthy. Instead, you picked someone who needed a chance to be herself. Are you, yourself I mean, more than I've ever been." She squeezed his hand gently. "I'm brilliant, dangerous, occasionally catastrophic, and absolutely devoted to improving coffee brewing technology. And for the first time in my life, I'm all of those things by choice rather than expectation." Marcus smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, he'd been a soldier looking for meaning after a brutal war. Now he was a leader in humanity's first successful interspecies community, partner to the galaxy's most dangerous scientist, and apparently someone who found joy in discussing quantum agricultural theory over breakfast. "So what's next?" he asked. "Well, Rodriguez and Patel's wedding is next week, and I've promised to provide entertainment that doesn't violate any major physical laws. The Trade Federation wants to establish a permanent diplomatic presence here, which means we'll need to expand our facilities. And Father is sending a cultural exchange student who's apparently eager to learn about human romantic customs." "That sounds complicated." "Delightfully so." Zara stood and stretched, her movements graceful despite the technical components she still wore like jewelry. "But first, I think our coffee maker is trying to tell us something important about tomorrow's brewing schedule." Sure enough, gentle chimes were emanating from their kitchen, where their semi-sentient appliance was apparently offering suggestions about optimal morning beverage preparation. "You know," Marcus said as they headed inside, "I'm beginning to think that choosing the weakest woman in that tribute vault was the smartest thing I've ever done." "Technically," Zara replied with a grin, "you chose the most dangerous person in 17 star systems who was very good at pretending to be harmless." Even better. As they entered their HAB unit, Marcus reflected on how completely his understanding of strength had changed. Real strength, he'd learned, wasn't about weapons or power. It was about choosing kindness when you could choose conquest, building rather than destroying, and finding ways to make impossible things seem ordinary through the simple act of caring about other people. And if that sometimes involved quantum turnips, probability-enhancing wedding gifts, and coffee makers with opinions about optimal brewing temperatures, well, that just made life more interesting. Outside, New Geneva continued its quiet work of proving that the impossible was simply another word for not yet attempted. While somewhere in the galaxy, other colonies looked up at the stars and wondered what might be possible if they too had the courage to choose hope over fear. The answer, as Zara would have told them, was simple: anything you were brave enough to imagine and smart enough to make real.